Okay, so I think we can resume, right? So before we are going to see this demo about cross-site scripting, we do the last, say, quick topic for today's lectures, which is about modules. Okay, so we solved a lot of doubts that I've seen in the labs, and that's the last topic about JavaScript, by the way. So we finished the discussion about JavaScript today. There's nothing more you need to learn about the JavaScript language. Actually, there could be classes, prototypes, and stuff, but we are not going to see them in this course because we don't need them, and I mean they give additional complexity for something which is not really interesting at the moment for us. Oh, before I start, sorry. During the break, they told me the link for the slides for cross-site scripting were broken in the sense they pointed to last year's slides, which actually were fine, but they didn't include the last ones about the content security policy. So I fixed it during the break. Now, if you click on them, it's fine. Okay? I mean, this is just the first, but yeah, everything should be working. So reload the page in case. Okay, so just a few words about modules. Oops. You remember that we said, well, each JavaScript file is a program. You want to have more than one file as usual. I mean, when we program, we start writing code, it becomes a lot of code, and we want to subdivide it into meaningful ways, different source code files and stuff like that. And we say, well, these different programs in the browser can interact, but they share the global space, right? Window, okay, and the global object, and that's not really good for modularity and reasons like this, okay? Because if we have two global variables that have the same name, they come from two different libraries we don't control. I mean, there's nothing we can really do. Either we use one or the other, and we cannot use both. So modules are recent. I mean maybe last 5-10 years. For splitting JavaScript programs into separate files that can be imported when needed. And basically, we already saw a way to import stuff, which was in Node with a require function, okay, that is made available by Node. And so now we clarify a few concepts about this process, okay? So basically, modules are born because we have the necessity to encapsulate or hide private implementation details of the code that we would like to import. Okay, so it's like when you I have content in an object in a traditional object-oriented programming language. You don't allow the rest of the code to access internal variables and stuff, okay? And I mean, here the reason is exactly the same, okay? You have three kinds of modules. Well, the first one, you just keep it. I mean, you make it yourself. You know that in JavaScript, you can create functions. They have a private scope, and you can access all the rest through the closure, but I mean, that's a principle that is used by the other two methods, but I mean, we are not going to do things by ourselves. So there are two different ways at the moment you can use to include modules. One is just for Node, so we will leave it for the last slide. And the system is called the CommonJS because basically Node was born in a moment in which ES6 was not so used, and so it didn't have the possibility to use this import and export directives that are now present in ES6 to import modules and stuff. Okay. And so they came out with an idea that was to provide an internal function that is called require, that is the one that we already saw before. And so let's have a look at the standard way of importing and exporting information from modules. That is the one, let's say, that was born with the ES6. Okay. The good news is basically that it's supported by the browsers. Okay. It will be the way in which we import stuff when we are going to program with React from next week. And also recent versions of Node started supporting it. So we are slowly converging towards using ES6 modules. Okay. So we are about to forget the require. Okay. In a not so distant future. I mean, in a few years, hopefully. Okay, so let's have a look at the ES6 modules. Well, actually, we have two keywords, export and import. I call them directives. I mean, call it as you like, but basically they are keywords like for, if, throw, and so on. In modern JavaScript, you can write import to import functionality from modules. And when you write modules, you write your own module, like a piece of the program you would like to put together with the rest, and you need to export something, okay? Like with extern in C, for instance, and stuff like that. And export is the keyword in JavaScript. Import and export must be at the top level. And we have two kinds of exports. That's the default export. You can have only one, or you can have multiple exports, and they're called named exports as well, because we need to give names to the thing we are exporting so that we can import them easily on the other side. And there can be more than one for each module. Okay? So, let's see how to use these keywords very quickly. I mean, it's quite intuitive. I mean, you look at the examples and you try, and of course, we are in the lab to help, but I mean, it's really easy. And basically, it's almost already used in the example. So, the syntax for exporting the default value is export default. Okay, very simple. And then you need to put a value, which can be any JavaScript value. So, a string, a number, but more typically, it's an object. So you can export more than one thing at the same time, okay? You can export, also an object that has a lot of properties typically, and these properties can be functions. You can export functions as well, but if you export a function, a single function, you only export a single function, okay? So the usefulness of modules is typically to provide more than one function. Okay. So that's the syntax to export a single value. Okay. You can give names to the thing that you export. Okay. But only if they are not the default export. Okay. So if you just put a name, that's the name that you use to export it. Okay. So export grades, and the name of the export will be grades. Okay? Export default grades, it doesn't give a name. Export grades gives the name grades to the export. And you can export more than one value, well, with the syntax that looks like an object. Okay? And in practice, it's more or less like an object. So you just export something, some values, separated by the comma, and these values are JavaScript values. Can be anything, again, values, but more typically functions. Okay, typically you export functions because you need the code to run functions. You can also rename them when you're exporting them with the as keyword. Okay, but that's a detail. Once you export the stuff, how do you import the stuff? Well, with the import keyword. You need to import something, and there will be a name here, and now we're going to see what. From, well, that's a string that describes the module name, okay? Can be something already prepared, like a package that you install, or can be your files, so the name of one of your files, okay? Okay, so let's see, export default, and I export a function. On the other side, in another file, in another place, I will import this function. How do I import it? Well, I import something from module1.js, that is the name of the file, in the same directory, of course, otherwise you need to indicate the correct path, okay, to find the file. Okay. This name is chosen by me, that I write the module 2, and so I decide what's the name of the default that I'm importing, okay? Because the default has no name, basically. And then, once I import it, it becomes, it becomes something which is available in my JavaScript code. So like uppercase, it was exported and it was a function. I can use it, so I can call this function. Of course, if I exported a value, I cannot call the value, right? But typically you export the functions, okay? And so I'm basically executing the code that comes from another module, okay? So the JavaScript interpreter sees import, reads the other file, it executes the other file, and the other file creates a set of variables that are accessible through the export and import mechanisms to the current one. But in a controlled way, because what you don't import, you cannot use. So you don't see it in the namespace of the current program. Okay, and so you can control what part becomes visible to what program. Import from a named export. So export name another name. So this is the syntax for a named export. It's not default. And import, and you need to use this syntax. Okay. You can also rename the imports in case, but you need to say what you want to import, and you need to use the same names that were used during the export, because you need to match the things, right? There are more than one. Okay, so should be quite intuitive. You can also import everything. Not so much used, I must say. You can also import just a few of the exports. Many packages export a lot of things, a lot of functions, values, and so on. You just import a subset, only what is needed for you. Okay? That's more typical, and that's a typical situation for us. Okay, you can import the default as well, but it doesn't really matter. How can we use the modules in the browser? Well, actually, there's an attribute you have on script, type equal to module, and you import the script as a module. Okay? So it means if it contains export something, it will become visible in the code that you execute in your browser, and you can import only some of the values in a controlled way, using import keyword with the syntax we already saw. Okay? Typically, you only load one module, and the module will have import from others. That's fine. And that's why this module system is useful. Remember that only files loaded with type module may use the import and export keyword. So if you try on the lab and you just add the script source equal to my app.js, import and export don't work because they only work with type module. Okay? Modules are also automatically loaded in the fair mode, that we say that it's the best way of loading JavaScript. And unfortunately, you cannot load modules locally. Okay, that's why we didn't use them in the lab. Okay, because there's a security restriction. We are going to talk about CORS a bit later in the course, and basically you cannot load both the HTML and JavaScript as a file locally if you have the file imported as a module. Okay, it's a bit inconvenient, I know, but that's the rule of modern browsers. Okay. Okay, so let's come to Node.js. Node.js also supports import. So why I told you to use require? Well, actually, not all Node.js modules are provided in the form of ES6 modules. I must say, probably today, most of the things we are going to use also have an ES6 form. So when you install the package, you also have the code that exports the stuff according to the ES6 syntax. And so you can write import. But we are not always sure, because if the maintainer of the package didn't provide a version with the exports, so with the ES6 modules, it doesn't work. Okay? So to be on the safe side with Node.js, we said, well, always use require, because that's the oldest way and the way that was born with Node. So if somebody wanted to provide you a module for Node, they for sure provided the common JS format, so the one that you can import with require. Okay? And most of the modules nowadays also have an ES6 version, so when you do npm install, they install both. Okay? And so you can do import, but we are not sure. Okay? So if you want to experiment with a library which we didn't discuss, you need to know how to import it in Node, and basically the only way in which we are safe is require. Okay, just a couple of words about common JS modules, so the Node.js format. Okay, unfortunately, they are not natively supported by browsers, and so this is just for Node. And basically, what did they do? I mean, in Node, they took advantage of the fact that the functions had a private scope, and basically everything you execute in Node is like being executed into a function that has a set of parameters, exports, require, and module. And so now you know why the require function is available when you execute Node, right? And you discover also what is the exports that we used in an example, I think a couple of weeks ago. Okay? It's just available because it's an object that is passed to the program that is executed in Node, and to which you can add properties, as we did in that example. And we added functions, and since you add to exports, they are automatically exported. Okay? Because how Node works with this common JS infrastructure. Okay. You already know how to work with the common JS because you saw it require with the name of the module. You can even import your own modules, but I don't recommend to do this. Well, actually, no, I recommend to do this, but we did it for the DAO, sorry. Yeah, I mean, just keep the things simple. I mean, you just import the file name, just make sure the path is correct. But I mean, if it's incorrect, when you execute the file, Node will give you an error because it cannot import the module. Okay? Okay. Yeah, the exports, I already told you, it's in an example that we saw, actually in the DAO. Of an example that we already saw. So everything you add to exports becomes exported from that file and can be imported with the require in another one. So that's the only thing I had to say about modules. And I must tell you, this is mostly for completeness. So now you know what you are doing on the server with the require and with the exports. Okay, it's fine to use the require on the server. In case you really want, you can experiment with import and export. On the client side, from next week, we will start using React, and we will use also a package that will prepare an environment for using React. So basically, we will not care about all these things. And from next week, on the client side, we will use only ES6 modules. So we will focus on writing import and so on. And everything will be imported with this keyword, okay? Because it's code that will be later loaded by the environment that help us with the React directly into the browser, okay? But I mean, it's more difficult to say than to see, okay? Okay, so now we are ready to have a look at the example, right? I promised that I will show you some cross-scripting stuff. So I prepared this example, the week 06, one example that is on the website. So that's a lecture examples, week 06. It's almost ready. We will do just a few small modifications, you know, just to play a little bit with the example. Okay? So how is this constructed? Actually, it includes a client part, which is here in the public. So there's app.js and so on. Now we are going to explore them. That's basically more or less what you did in the lab. But for our example, a question and answer. They are not a film list, a film library, and so on. And then there is also the server. So the index.js to be run as a server with the DAO and with the database. Okay, there are more than one file. More than one file for the database because we have different database with different content. Something has been injected previously by me actually in the database, and so we can experiment a little bit. Okay, so let's have a look at the content. So there is a web server. So this index.js, it's actually, you know, Express, user stuff, Morgan for logging, a little bit of validation and so on that we will enable, disable, depending on what we want to experiment. And then we have some APIs like get API questions, list question, select, etc. from the database, and we will return stuff in JSON format. Okay. Question ID, get, I think there is also a post API answers with a little bit of validation. So you have a second example about APIs. Okay. Second way of validating. An example that is validating something different from your films in the film library example in the lab. Put, and I think it's also, the vote and the delete. This is code that we basically already wrote in the previous lectures, right? So we can simply run it. So how do we do it? Well, of course, npm install, I already did it during the break. Nodemon index, okay? I run it with Nodemon, so I show the Nodemon, and also since I'm going to do some modification in the files, it's useful, so I don't have to reload the server, okay? Fine, so basically we can test it as we did until now with this extension, the REST client. So let's just try if it works. I mean, send a simple API request, get API questions. Yes, we get 200 OK. It's fine. It's a list of, it's an array with a single element in JSON format. You see the content type, application JSON. It's automatically written by Express, and because I think I imported, no, sorry, wanted to see here. I imported the middleware. No, maybe it's already inside. No, okay. Not really sure if it's needed for the answer. It's for sure needed for the input. Okay, when we get the post with the JSON content. But in any case, you do .json, and the answer is in JSON format, it's converted by Express, and the header is inserted as well by Express. Okay, fine. So it seems it's working, right? So now we need the client part, right? So the client part has been has been written here in public. That's an index HTML file. So Bootstrap and all this stuff, day.js, and our table, which is actually empty. You see, it's empty, right? Fine. It's empty. And to fill it, we do as you did in the lab. So we write some code, app.js, and we execute it. Okay? So app.js contains, oh, that's the old one. Actually, that's the same example as last year. It contains some functions that do what you did in the lab. Document, create element, td, tr, and so on, append child, and all the stuff that is needed to create HTML elements from a JavaScript, in this case, array. Okay, I think answer list is an array. I think so. Yeah. And it creates elements that corresponds to what is contained in the array. But you don't see the array here, right? So where is the array? Where is the content that we are going to show in the page? Well, actually, I decided, for this lecture, to load the content from the server. Okay? Since we have a server running, why don't we try to load the content from a server? That's fine. So actually, get all answers. Let me see where it is. You see, we talked about fetch. Let's try to use the fetch. Fetch URL plus. So basically, we construct a URL that is HTTP localhost 3001 API /question question ID /answers. Let's try what this API does. Question ID, answers. I think it's this one, right? So we have a list of answers. Okay, it's fine. And so, how do we use it on the client side? Well, we simply call the fetch, right? So the fetch was, where was the fetch? Fetch, no, it was not here. In the APIs, okay? Yeah. Fetch, and then we have a response. We said response.json. That's fine. It's provided by the browser because we use the fetch, and the response object of the fetch already has a method .json. And that's why we want to use the JSON, because it's so simple. We don't have to write a single line of code to handle the JSON. Okay? And we get the questions. If everything is fine, questions, we create the answers, and then we return the answers. Okay? And so we get what we brought directly into the code last time in the example in the previous lectures. Okay? But this time we loaded it from the server. Okay? By the way, how can we use a function which is available in another file? We saw API here, and we were in app, right? So if you look here, import get all answers from API.js. It's the import that we just talked about. It's an ES6 import. Okay, so it's an ES6 module. It's fine, and it's a named import. And we decided to import just this name. That's fine. I think it's the only one which is exported. Yes, it's fine. Okay, we cannot really import anything else. But I mean, this is a named export, and the other is the import of a named export. It's fine. Okay? Good. So we need to run this JavaScript code in the browser. Let's go back to the index. The JavaScript code is using the modules, and so we need to import it as a module. type module. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Okay? We don't need defer because it's already deferred. And it needs to be a module, otherwise import and export will not work. And as you can see here, I didn't import the API. Okay? API is imported in app. That's a typical situation. You only import the main program, and the main program will import the rest by itself. Okay? Okay, good. So we need to try if it works, right? So which is the URL at which we can access our web application? Because until now, we only tested these API URLs, right? Well, we are still missing one piece, but we already talked about this. You remember the static middleware of Express? Everything you put into the directory you write here, public, is accessible through the URLs with this prefix. So I decided to create a prefix /static in the URLs, after which I can load anything that is available on the folder in the web server. Okay? So in the public, we have 5 files. Of course, I could access, style CSS, for instance. It's fine, but I mean, I'm not able to load an HTML page in this way. I just download the file, right? So the only element that makes sense to load is index.html, sorry. And this will load the rest automatically because it refers to the other elements, right? Like my style CSS, the app.js, and so on. Okay? So let's try. So let's open a browser. Maybe another one. Which one I use? This one. Localhost 3001 static index HTML. Okay, I need to tell you because it's small, I cannot make it bigger. Localhost 3001 /static index HTML. Okay, act. It's nice, right? Okay, we started with the example that has the cross-scripting vulnerability. Okay, now we'll fix it. Okay, this is the web application. Okay, so remember we started from an HTML which had no content, I mean no list of answers. That's the HTML that we served. This one, no content, just the header of the table. And then there's a table body with an ID that I can use in app to fill in stuff. Create answer list. Yes, that's the ID. Yeah, get element by ID answers. So it gets the reference to the element in HTML. And once you have this reference, you do append child of everything you need. The tr, table row, and then the table data and stuff like that. Okay? Fine. So the application is working now. What I want to show you is, let's change the database for the moment. QA initial, because otherwise we get hacked every time. Right? That's not nice. Okay, so let me open the inspector. I invite you to always have the inspector open when you are testing your programs and your applications and so on. And again, at the exam, I will always have the inspector open. I need to understand what's happening in your application, and you need to as well. Okay, so let's reload the page with the network tab open. Okay, no, what is reload? Okay, unable to connect. I forgot. Yeah, I forgot to rerun the server. Sorry. Okay, I just needed to copy the database. That's why I stopped it. So again, you see this here, you see the list of requests that starts from the browser and goes to the web server. Okay? So of course, the first one has been initiated by me by typing the URL here, okay? And the other ones are automatic by the browser. Something is because of the text present in the HTML, like you see bootstrap, min, icons, and so on. Something is the stuff I declared, like app.js, that has been included in the head script type module, okay? It got executed, so it included, see the response, this is the code. It included this import and stuff, so the browser loaded everything it needed, okay? APIs, etc. At a certain point, it also issued the request that I told the fetch to do. You see here, get HTTP localhost 3001 API questions, 1 answers. Okay, this is what the fetch was supposed to do. URL HTTP localhost 3001 API questions. Question ID that was 1 fixed as yes here as a parameter. Answers. Okay, and so in response we have the method JSON, and in questions we will get an object that corresponds to the answer of the server. So the response is here. We can see the raw stuff. It's just a string. It's a JSON string. Very inconvenient to read, right? So that's why in the inspector we can also tell the inspector to parse it, so it's easier to read. And it's an array. You see, it starts with the It starts with the squared bracket. It's an array, and it's an array of objects because there's a curly bracket afterwards. It's easier to read in this form. And so there are 4 objects with some properties, okay? Actually, this has been reconstructed as a JavaScript array automatically by the response JSON method. This one. So I didn't write a single line of code to handle JSON, okay? Questions, and then questions, I can do whatever I want with this question. Question is an array, JavaScript array. It has everything available as any other JavaScript array. So there are the functional methods like map, for each, whatever you want. So here, what did I do? Well, it seems we like object-oriented programming, so we created an object with what we have here in the array. But I mean, it's not really required. I mean, we can just use this. This array of objects is still fine. Okay. This is just because you know, when we created the static content with the predefined array, we had this answer objects, and so we basically replicated the same structure. Okay, so this is already a good point. We saw a server plus a client where we run JavaScript, and this JavaScript is able to fetch data through the APIs from the server. Actually, the same server. We only have one server, and in this server, we both served the first page, that the index HTML, the rest that is needed by the application, the JavaScript, the CSS, and also we can handle the reading from the database through the APIs that we already wrote in the previous lectures. Okay, good. So far, everything is good, right? So we see the application. Let's close the inspector for a moment. The vote even works, okay? Because that's what you did in the lab. I'm not sure if we used if we sent a request. You see, we don't send a request to the server. So this vote is just fake. I mean, it's just changing the content of the variable, JavaScript variable on the client. It doesn't change what is written in the database. Because the API is there, but we didn't call it through fetch, okay? We only did one fetch. It was just an example, okay? And this fetch only loaded the first time the information that is in the database. If you look at the database, yeah, you see it's still 3, okay? We are just playing on the client, okay? Good, but the objective of today was experiment a little bit with the cross-site scripting, right? So let's assume that somebody has modified our database, okay? Actually, as I did before, let's say that somebody has managed to insert this answer for our question. The question was, well, not really important, but I mean, best way of enumerating an array in JavaScript. For of, for each, for whatever, okay? Somebody has written less than img, src, and so on, something that we saw on the slide. I just swapped the database, so I stopped the server, okay? And I just overwrite the database, so I don't change the code. I restart the server. And I reload the page as well. Okay. Where's the reload? Okay. And so you saw the code was executed. So the tag img was interpreted by the browser. There was a non-existent URL. Okay. This URL caused the onError handler to be executed, and I put the code that I wanted to execute in this onError handler. Let me show you, what I inserted in the database. Okay, I couldn't directly insert a script because there are multiple protections and stuff, and so the simple example with script doesn't work. Okay, so that's why I use this more complex stuff. Okay. But I mean, this is just an alert because it's very easy to see that the code has been executed. But of course, you could do, I mean, typically the attacker do something that doesn't show anything to the user, right? So they don't show you have been attacked. Okay, and so what's the point here? The point is that, we got a response from the server. We had 5 objects, and the text of the object was img and so on. So something that was taken as it is and used and displayed as it is, interpreted as it is by the browser. So there is another problem. I mean, to make this example work, I need to bypass a lot of protections and good practices, including the one I told you before. How does this code work? I mean, how is it possible that I show the img, but I'm interpreting the img? So the browser interprets the img. Well, actually, I use this inner HTML. I did it on purpose. You see the comment because actually the correct code, I mean, the better code would be that one that is written below, right? Of course, if you use inner HTML, you are exposed to run any code that comes from the server, okay? It's my server. It's the server I trust. But something like that cross-site scripting we talked about, the stored CSS attack happened before. I did it, of course, on purpose. I did it myself. But, I mean, somebody else could have given that answer, right? Everybody can give answer on Stack Overflow and this kind of website, right? So anybody can write anything. So you need to be protected against these situations. One protection is, well, of course, avoid using inner HTML. That's the simplest solution, right? But, I mean, sometimes it's not so obvious. I told you, maybe it's in a library. And you're not the one who is using something dangerous. And also, sometimes you would like to use the inner HTML. Look at the rest of the content. You see, for B and something. So I wanted to allow my users to use some basic HTML formatting. It's fine. I mean, you see that this is in bold, this is in italics. So one is strong. I mean, it's bigger in terms of the size of the font. The other is italic, and so on. It can be easily achieved with some HTML text. So without the inner HTML, of course, I can put text here, right? Text, save, and try again. Of course, we don't have the, oops, where is the reload button? Ah, no reload button. Well, it disappeared. It doesn't matter. Okay. Now the code is not executed anymore, but I lost the functionality. Okay? Actually, I lost too much. I expected it to show something. UTD, no, it was inner text, right? Text, sorry. Something was supposed to be shown. Okay, now it works. Okay, you see, I lost the functionality. So, of course, I mean, now there's no problem in being hacked because the code is not executed, right? But I cannot make the italics, strong stuff work, okay? So either I do use the inner HTML and I'm exposed to these problems, or I forbid using HTML text and interpreting HTML text when I'm showing things coming from the database, okay? I need to choose. Well, actually, I don't really want to choose. I want to be protected against cross-site scripting, but also using the text. So let's see what we can do in HTML, okay? So let's go to the database code just to show you something. An index, okay. There should be a place where, no, it's not here. No, that's on the client side, I think. The example was on the client side. No, I don't remember where it was. Let me search for escape. No. I need to copy and paste from the solution. So I don't remember where I put it. If it was the server, I think it was the server. Yes, it was the server. So for instance, this is the API, questions ID answer, okay? Instead of returning what is written in the database directly, I escape it, okay? Let me escape it. So one is the place where I am copy and pasting to be fast, and the other is the place we are actually running. Yes, so res JSON result here. So I'm just modifying the code here. I mean, the best solution would be no dangerous stuff is in the database. But at the moment, I mean, I cannot really, I mean, to be fast, I keep the stuff in the database. I don't modify the post. I didn't show you the post and all the stuff to insert the things in the database. Let's just see what we can do, just, you know, trying to escape stuff. And so we will see the result. Okay. You are right, yes. So result, oops, const. And here we do, yes, res JSON, new array, okay? So before returning stuff to the client, I run escape using this validator, the package I told you in the slides, which I already installed and imported. And so let's see what happens if I escape the stuff. Okay. I saved. Let's try again. Okay. But actually, I'm not hacked. Okay. And that's actually what comes from the client, right? So what is the answer to the API? You see the LT, GT, and so on. The less than and greater than sign have been changed, have been escaped. But actually, that's not what I wanted. Of course, I'm protected, but it's not a solution which is nice for my application because I wanted to have the bold and the italics and stuff. Okay? So that's not a good solution for this case. Actually, the good solution is the other one, the sanitize. Okay? Because I want to keep some HTML stuff inside. So just try it. Okay. So we see the difference between escaping and sanitizing. Let's try. Okay. No act. Okay. But the bold is there and the italics is there. What comes from the server is shown here. You see? The problem, the on error attribute has been removed from the sanitization process. Okay? So you need to decide if you need to escape or sanitize. Okay? Best thing is avoiding having problems and difficult, problematic content in the database. But, you can also try to fix it once you present it to the client. You go back to the client and you send back the information to the client. So that's a possibility. Okay. Let me see, what should we... Okay, so let's go back again, okay, and see, that's the original stuff, right? So this one is vulnerable. Let me try again. Yes, that's the one that has problems. Today, we also said, well, modern browsers have an additional feature, which is the content security policy, right? So let's try to enable it. How can we enable it? Well, when we serve the first page response row, okay, we need to either have something in the header or in the HTML header, HTTP headers. These are the response header, HTTP response header. There's no content security policy, right? That's the default of Express. It doesn't send anything, okay? So let's try to enable it. It's already prepared, just commented, because it's a bit long to write. And so you also understand, it's a bit long to configure because you need to say a lot of things, like we are using this JS deliver for the CDN for Bootstrap. We're using the AMP package to import the JS. So we need to explicitly allow all these domains, otherwise things will break. And then there's a self, so from the same website is fine. And if you don't add inline, which I didn't do at the moment, you prevent internal scripts inline in the page from being executed. Okay? Which is basically the problem that you have when you have cross-site scripting that relies on JavaScript. So let's save and let's try again. Okay, this time we don't have the window hacked. Good. And nothing has changed before. So the answer is still contains the on error alert act and so on. But when you insert the index HTML in the headers response, we got this content security policy, which is quite complex, long header. It's basically said you can execute scripts only if they come from the server or from these other 2-3 servers, which are Bootstrap and the JS and stuff. And so basically the browser helped us to stop execution of unwanted script. Of course, if we have inline scripts ourselves, well, we are kind of mad, but I mean, they will not work as well because it cannot distinguish between ours and something that has been injected. Okay. Just to show you the difference, like inline, if you configure things in the wrong way, okay, we are exposed again. So it's not because you have the content security policy in place that everything is solved. You need to configure it correctly, of course. Okay, but it's quite easy in the sense that if you only allow what you trust and you avoid inline scripting and stuff like that, typically you're quite safe. Okay. Last thing I want to show you. So I removed the inline, and I wanted to show you that even if you cannot control the web server, as we said, you can add it as a header part in the HTML. Like if you serve content from a CDN, that's a typical situation for big applications. So it's already written because you see it's long, right? So save, and let's execute it again. I think you need to reload. You need to be careful when you load stuff again. Sometimes you need to force reloading with the uppercase button, so shift, okay, and shift and the symbol for reloading. Now, yeah, I try, or maybe I forgot the wrong configuration in the file. Yeah, safe and unsafe inline, sorry. Save. And let's do the operation. Yes, okay. So you achieved the same result without having the header in the HTTP headers. No content security policy here, but it's in the HTML. In the head section, you have this content security policy. Okay? So that's an alternative way that you can use to make sure that the browser only interpret and execute content that actually is in an allowed list. Okay? Either the same website or some trusted websites. And since we don't really trust anything which is external from our website, actually, remember, we still have the integrity check. This doesn't substitute the approach with the integrity check for external resources, because external resources are external. They can change at any time. Okay? Okay, so I think we saw everything we wanted to see. I'm not sure, do you have any doubts, questions? I know it was kind of intense, and we are not going to experiment this stuff in the lab. So next lab will be already about React. On Monday we will talk about React introduction, and then the next day you experiment with React. I mean, you just start with a very, very simple application. You create the project and all this stuff. You can play with this example, and why we didn't want to continue with this example in the lab. Well, actually because using React on the client side basically make us forget, doing all this programming on the client side. But I wanted you to experiment at least once in the lab how long and how difficult, how how dangerous can be programming directly in JavaScript the behavior of your client application. And that's why we are going to see this React framework from next lecture, so we can have some help from people that already prepared the code and in a way to simplify the development for us, okay, on the client side. So if there are no questions, I think that's all for today. I will commit the example in the state, in the last state that we saw, so with the content security policy in the HTML header, and I think that's all for today. Okay, if you have any questions, of course, come after the lecture or send me an email and I will answer.